MSW Media.
They Might Be Giants have been on the road for too long. And They Might Be Giants aren't even sorry.
Not even sorry.
And audiences like the shows too much. And now They Might Be Giants are playing their breakthrough album, Flood.
All of it.
And they still have time for other songs.
They're fooling around.
Who can stop They Might Be Giants and their liberal rock agenda?
Who?
No one.
This ad was paid for with somebody else's money.
The rule of law is not just some lawyer's turn of phrase. It is the very foundation of our democracy. The essence of the rule of law is that like cases are treated alike. That there not be one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans, one rule for the powerful, another for the powerless, one rule for the rich and another for the poor, or different rules depending upon one's race or ethnicity. To serve as Attorney General at this critical time is a calling I am honored and eager to answer.
So yeah, now it's clean up on aisle 45 time. And for a long while yet, it is going to be clean up on aisle 45.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 24 of Clean Up on Aisle 45. It is Wednesday, June 30th, and I'm your co-host, Andrew Torres.
And I'm Morgan Stringer, in for Allison Gill, who's on vacation. We have a fantastic show for you today. But first, as always, we need to thank our patrons who support the show over at patreon.com/aisle45pod for as little as $1 an episode. If you haven't done that yet, consider doing that now. It's a great way to say you love the show and you want this partnership to continue. So thanks to this week's new patrons: Dana Hufford, Quartermaster Jacob Thorne, Matt Gatewood, Jeff Gelbach, Debbie Morse, Tom Pegg, Chris Galvin White, Jordan Galash, James Heath, comedian Aaron Trahan, aka Game Jumper X.
And a big thank you to Half Squatch, to Dave Walker, Gretchen Waldo, Satanic Nightjar. I've learned that that's an insect. I think it's either an insect or a plant, but it's amazing.
I need it.
Leslie, Liam Ferris, Greta Kretschmer, Atomic Penguin, that is at Atomic Penguin 7 on Twitter. That's pretty cool. Ann Dubell, Beverly Potter, Denise, and Guardian Balerin.
And if you'd like to join them, head over to patreon.com/aisle45pod. And now, on to the A block.
Yeah, so, Morgan, this story broke over the weekend, but undoubtedly will still be front page news by the time that everyone's hearing this episode. Everyone now knows the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, that's Cy Vance's office, working hand in hand over the past 6 months with New York Attorney General Letitia James, has now said that indictments are imminent and reportedly gave attorneys for the Trump Organization until the end of the day, Monday, that's when we're recording this, to make their case as to why the Trump Org and possibly various executives, likely including CFO Alan Weisselberg, should not be indicted. Although people who, were playing along with the Mueller, She Wrote Fantasy Indictment League probably won't be surprised. I am betting, Morgan, that some of the show listeners are surprised learning that companies can be indicted for criminal charges.
Corporations are people, my friend. Just like real people, a corporation can be sued and is capable of committing crimes. Ask me how I know. I suspect that what trips up a lot of people is that you think of the primary way that people get held responsible for committing crimes is by being put in jail. And you can't put the Trump Organization in jail as as many of us wish probably that they could. But you can fine the crap out of it. You can impose legal monitoring to make sure it doesn't keep criming in the future. And because the company acts through individuals, the top executives at those companies can do prison time when they've acted in their official capacity.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And insofar as, rich white people ever suffer for anything, like this actually happens probably more than you'd think, right? Sanjay Kumar was CEO of Computer Associates, that Fortune 500 company, I think a Fortune 100 company. He cooked the books there to the tune of $2.2 billion and served 12 years in prison for obstruction of justice and securities fraud. Bernie Ebbers, our Good friend. Got 25 years for orchestrating the WorldCom scandal. Martin Grass at Rite Aid, Joseph Naccio at Quest, Walter Forbes at Sendit, right? They all did the same thing, which was acting on behalf of their companies to fraudulently misstate revenue, right? So that as to avoid taxes, so as to inflate the market value of the company in whatever way, and then, deriving the benefits from having an artificially inflated value to the company. So they're working on the company's behalf in terms of committing a crime, and they were held responsible to the tune of, more than a decade in prison.
And to fill in the gaps, prosecutors will often charge a company CEO in an individual capacity as well, because when a fraud gets committed, it's either on behalf of a company, as they say, like WorldCom, which is my hometown fraud. I used to have ringside tickets to the Jackson Bandits, which was the team that Bernie Ebbers owned.
Oh, good.
Yeah, pun, I guess, was intended there. So in that case, like where you're helping the company.
That's great.
Yeah, it was great. I was like, maybe he was telling us a bit too much there. But so, yeah, like WorldCom, where you're helping the company evade taxes and benefiting indirectly from the ill-gotten gains, or you're defrauding the company like John Regas and his idiot sons at Adelphia. They basically use the company's accounts as their own personal piggy bank, which is what we think of when we think of, this type of fraud, right? So you charge these guys individually and on behalf of a company, and then you figure out whether they were working with or against the rest of the organization.
Yeah, and so here we're talking about the Trump org, right? So I know what everyone wants to know when we talk about top executives at the Trump organization. We're here to give you the temporary bad news, okay? Listen up. Donald Trump will not be indicted by Cy Vance and Tish James this week. Okay, that doesn't mean he won't be indicted. It means the way prosecutors work in cases like this is by proceeding with their strongest case first, right? Remember, the first person up in the Mueller probe was George Papadopoulos, right? Flynn came later. Michael Cohen didn't flip for almost 2 years. It took until 2019 to indict Roger Stone. And, that guy's a walking felony waiting to happen.
Yeah, every time he opens my mouth, I'm like, I think that might be a crime you've admitted to. But yes. Yeah. And yeah, here we have very strong indications that Vance is going to start with Weisselberg. So we know that Vance and James have been looking into these allegations that the Trump organization used misleading valuations of its properties to deceive lenders and taxing authorities, which you don't want to defraud a tax authority. They will send you to jail. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. But we've also learned recently that they've also been investigating whether taxes were paid on fringe benefits for company executives. So this is according to court documents and Trump's attorney, Ronald Fischetti, who basically threw down a bunch of taunts on Monday night.
That behavior is so weird. So look, it's important to keep this straight. Fischetti is Trump's personal lawyer, and he told Politico two things that I think probably are true. He said a bunch of stuff that almost certainly isn't. But the two things that probably are true are, one, that Trump will not be indicted this week, and two, that the Trump org and various executives probably will be, right? And notice that the lawyer who represents the Trump organization, right, Alan Futerfas, has kept his goddamn mouth shut, right? So, Morgan, how do you read this, I don't know, full court press that Fischetti put on Monday night?
It's so weird, bizarre. So Fischetti began by mocking the potential charges to be brought by Vance, which is certainly a choice.
Is that waving the red carpet in front of the bull, or?
Yeah, it's like a WWE event's about to happen. I'm not sure what's going on, but so
he's got the chair.
He's got the chair. We're about to see it go down. The Rock's going to enter. I would not be shocked by anything at this point. So Fischetti told Politico that the only charges he knew of was that members of Vance's team said they were considering bringing charges against the Trump organization and its individual employees related to alleged failures to pay taxes on corporate benefits and perks. So these are the cars and apartments you mentioned earlier, which we presume involves only a handful of top execs and would not constitute serious felonies under New York law.
Yeah.
It's crazy that's all they had, Fischetti added, after emphatically stating that the indictment would not involve any of the allegations by and about Michael Cohen or Stormy Daniels, which I think is kind of a, interesting aside, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think we could psychoanalyze this guy for days, but like saying we don't expect the New York indictments to involve Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels, right, is like pointing out that, gummy bears are gluten-free. Like, well, of course they are, right? Like, nobody expected them to have any gluten in them, right? Like, it's not bread. And the same way, like, the Stormy Daniels stuff is very clearly a federal election law crime, right? Like, you and I have talked about that a lot back over on Opening Arguments. And especially with the New York dual sovereigns rule, right? Like, I wouldn't want Vance to have to make some kind of like half-ass fraud chart, right? Like, I mean, I don't even know what you could get Trump on with respect to Michael Cohen laundering illegal hush money payments under federal election law and calling them retainers, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff you could get Michael Cohen on, and they have gotten Michael Cohen on. So that's kind of a weird flex. But let's read between the lines a little bit on the rest of the stuff that Fischetti said. Okay. So first, he very clearly talked about what he'd been told, right? I will be stunned. I'll be the first person I'll do an Andrew Was Wrong here on this show next week if the first set of charges against the Trump org do not also include the top line real estate fraud stuff, right? The inflating the value of the properties. That evidence has been worked over in the public. The New York Times has done really good investigative journalism on it. And if that charge is not brought, everybody has a right to be unhappy about what Cy Vance's office has done, and I'll have to revisit my my evaluation of him, and I've defended him on this show. But I understand like why Vance wouldn't have told Trump's personal lawyer about those charges, because if the fraud was ongoing, it occurred while Trump was president and presumably not personally running the day-to-day operations, right? So it's none of Fischetti's business. So, number one, he just said, I was told about X, right? There may be things that he wasn't told about. And then number two, note how careful Fischetti was to parse his words. This is from the same Politico article. Quote, they just said when this indictment comes down, he, meaning Trump, won't be charged. And then Fischetti adds, they also said, our investigation is ongoing, right? And in a subsequent interview with an Alabama newspaper, of all things, Fischetti accidentally conceded, yeah, I can't say he's out of the woods yet completely.
Do not discount Alabama newspapers. Sometimes they get good quotes. They get good things. You should read their AL.com's recent article. They interviewed a local politician there about critical race theory, and it was clear he had no idea what the hell critical race theory even was. It was quite amusing and also infuriating. So yeah, don't sleep on them. They are doing some good journalism.
This was AL.com. So all right,
they are doing good work.
Our SEC correspondent Morgan Stringer out there to give props to AL.com. Well, I rescind the my backhanded compliment about Alabama. No, it's a good story and good work. Anyway, I interrupted. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. I try not to give Alabama too much credit, being somebody from Mississippi, but Right. But this does remind me of the classic Trump playbook. Like, when bad news is coming, you go on the offensive. You have Bill Barr get out in front of a Mueller investigation, just repeating these outright lies on national television, and then when the bad stuff eventually hits, you've muddied the waters enough so that nobody really knows what's going on, right? That kind of thing happened with the Mueller report, where it was like, well, what does it actually say? Does it exonerate Trump? And, you had all these people doing a back and forth. So you make it seem like this is just some tangential thing involving the Trump organization and not Donald Trump at all, because, Vance and James, they really, really want to get at Trump. I mean, This would be a great career move, and this would be, you get Trump. That's the biggest thing you could possibly do.
Yeah, you want to do justice, right? Like that is the building they work in. It says it on the outside. I think you're exactly right. Look, and And the key here, the linchpin to everything, is Weisselberg, right? So we heard months ago that Weisselberg had flipped. We talked about that on the show, right? That was the story that Allison and I covered about how the New York District Attorney's Office was going to bring pressure on his kids and like sent a subpoena to the school and like weird stuff, right? And then nothing happened, right? And so a few weeks ago, we saw rumblings that the DA's office was really unhappy with Weisselberg's lack of cooperation, right? So that's kind of the little soft stick. And to me, right, it then makes perfect sense, right? You spend a couple months, you ask Weisselberg politely to cooperate. He says no. You're like, all right, well, we're going to make life tough on your kids. And then he says, and says no. And then you're like, okay, man, well, then we're going to indict you criminally. And you bring down the hammer on him. And also to the Trump org COO, Matthew Calamari. And right, of course he has a henchman named Calamari, right? But you do that, and that's when the carrot starts looking pretty tasty, you know?
Yeah, you see calamari's about to get fried, and, you know.
All right, I was a little too easy.
But yeah, no, it literally, if I like was a writer of The Sopranos, in fact, if it got rebooted and I wrote in a character called Matthew Calamari, they'd say, you know, Miss Stringer, I think you've done enough here. You need to go. But it's real life is crazier than fiction. But yeah, so Business Insider, they interviewed Barbara Rez, a former executive vice president at the Trump org, and she opined that neither Weisselberg nor Calamari would be willing to go to jail for their boss. If you introduce the notion of criminal charges against any one of them or their children, you change the game completely, she said.
Yeah, so by the time the show drops, we'll probably still be waiting to hear what charges get announced and why. But if it seems pretty narrow, right, if it's just the Trump org, Weisselberg, and Calamari on those two fraud scenarios we've talked about, that's still really, really significant. And at the end of the day, if you want to build a case against Trump, you 100%, you absolutely cannot make that case without Weisselberg, because that's the guy who signed all the checks.
And unlike the past 4 years, right now, Trump can't pardon anybody. So, yeah, that's gone away. So he can't order his criminal lackey of an attorney general to drop charges against anybody. He can't tell you to skip out on subpoenas because of executive privilege, and everything I've told you is executive privilege. So if you're going to take one for Trump, you better be prepared to do 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, and so, look, this is going to be a wait and see. Like, if Barbara Ress is correct, like, that these guys are not willing to do a dime for Trump. But I wanted to go through that. I'm really, really glad you took us through a lot of that, Morgan, because I get the sense that some of our listeners, it was my first instinct too, are going to feel demoralized when Trump's name does not, Donald Trump Jr. does not show up in the indictment. And if you're feeling that way, I want you to remember that's exactly how Donald Trump's lawyer wants you to feel.
Yep. And so you get distracted and move on to something else. And,
Yep.
you know, yeah. And his name eventually, he's hoping, doesn't show up. But, you know, he's counting on that distraction. So, and one more thing, you're probably thinking, well, given that Cy Vance has Trump's tax returns, couldn't he have gotten Trump himself on, say, at least state tax evasion? And the answer to that is probably no, not without Weisselberg. So Trump runs these companies as LLCs, limited liability companies, and in particular as pass-through entities for tax purposes. So to get from a property to a valuation to a distribution to the number that's on Trump's tax returns, you absolutely have to have some kind of roadmap. So you need the person who turned number A into number B into number C into D and so on. And that person is going to be Alan Weisselberg.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. So yeah, we will keep watching. Don't get too demoralized. We'll tell you if it, turns out bad. But right now, to me, I think, Morgan, your read on that is exactly correctly. Feels like the kind of thing that somebody who's running scared is trying to, throw up a smokescreen in the short to medium term. But we'll find out. Okay, everybody, we will be right back after the break. Hey, this is an ad for Steady MD. Hi, friends. This is Andrew here for Cleanup on Aisle 45. I remember when telehealth was just a nice idea, right? It was something that seemed convenient, but not necessary. But now it's the norm, right? And Many of us, yours truly included, can't really imagine going into a doctor's office right now, right? SteadyMD is the practical and affordable way to take control of your health and get personalized care from the comfort of your home. SteadyMD Primary Care is your personal doctor online. It's telehealth done right. No, you start off by taking a quiz. You get matched with a licensed primary care physician who understands your lifestyle, your health needs. Next, you have a 1-hour appointment with your doctor to start that real relationship. After that, your doctor is available to you anytime by text, phone, or video chat, right? Unlike other services, this is not a random doctor on call, right? Each SteadyMD doctor has a limited number of patients, so they have time to listen and give you the personal attention that you deserve. Look, I took their quiz. I actually found it to be fun and super informative, right? I think you will be comfortable and confident in your primary care physician. SteadyMD Primary Care can help you get and stay healthy. They can help you manage your chronic conditions, concerns, reduce stress, lose weight, sleep better, feel better, all of that, right? All from the comfort of your own home. So skip the waiting rooms, skip the side-eyeing everybody sneezing in there. Go with SteadyMD. Prescriptions sent directly to your home or to your local pharmacy. You get to choose. You get all your medical records in one place. You get unlimited access to your doctor for only $99 per month with no additional visit fees or copays. SteadyMD will even help you understand and get the most out of your health insurance. But look, insurance is not required. SteadyMD Primary Care, now accepting members of all ages in all 50 states. Go to steadymd.com/cleanup. Take their free quiz, see which doctor is a perfect fit for you. SteadyMD.com/cleanup. No risk, no long-term commitment to get started. That's SteadyMD.com/cleanup. And we thank them for sponsoring the podcast.
For our next segment, I wanted to discuss a slew of voter suppression bills, but I also wanted to talk about Garland as how he now runs the DOJ. And lo and behold, I found a story that discusses both. So I get to talk about both, and I want to get into it.
All right.
So this is biased because I'm Southern. I'm not probably Southern. I am Southern, as you can probably listeners can probably tell and immediately clock me on. But yeah, so I wanted Doug Jones to be the Attorney General. So I am a little bit, Garland, okay. But I've noticed some criticisms of Garland coming out, and then I've also noticed the slew of voter suppression bills, and they've just kind of merged into one story together. So I want to get into it. So Merrick Garland announced that the DOJ is suing Georgia over its new election law. This is actually the 8th lawsuit over the law. Probably between now and then, there might be additional lawsuits. But we already have the Georgia NAACP, Concerned Black Clergy, and Mark Elias, of course, is in the fray on behalf of New Georgia Project, Black Voters Matter, and Rise Free. But it is still a big deal that the DOJ is now entering the arena.
Yeah, and to be clear, this is the Georgia law with which you are familiar that caused Major League Baseball to pull the All-Star game out of Atlanta. This is the one that makes it illegal to give water or food to anybody waiting in line. It makes it more difficult to vote absentee by mail. It limits the use of ballot drop boxes. And, we've talked about this, but the most critical aspect, which is allowing state officials to take over local election boards, the kind of thing that couldn't happen in 2020 that Republicans would now like to make happen in the future.
Exactly. So the grounds of this suit is the violation of Article 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which prohibits laws that result in a, quote, denial or abridgment of a right of any citizen of the United States to vote on account of race or color. In fact, the head of the Civil Rights Division, Kristen Clark, said, quote, these legislative actions occurred at a time when the Black population in Georgia continues to steadily increase and after a historic election that saw record voter turnout across the state, particularly for absentee voting, which Black voters are now more likely to use than white voters. And that is exactly what this lawsuit alleges.
Yeah, and look, that's exactly what this law does, right? It targets Black voters. We even saw where Georgia tried to keep Black voters from voting in 2020. We saw the incredibly long lines that people stood in just so that they could cast their ballot. The Republican Party knows they cannot win on votes alone. They have put that down in writing in the Hofeller docs, right? And if Stacey Abrams' trends continue, Georgia is effectively a blue state going forward. I think also it is reasonable to look around and go, what other states are the next Georgia in line? Is that Texas? Who knows, right? So if you're the Republican Party, you can't reverse the demographic reality that you are a minority in this country of the population. But what you can do is make yourself a majority of the voting population by disenfranchising more of the other side's voters. And the reason Georgia is blue is that African-American voters turned out. So Georgia wants to keep them from voting. Morgan, does this lawsuit signal a trend in your mind? Like, we've had a lot of really complimentary things to say about Kristen Clark here on the show. Do you think that signals a trend that the DOJ is going to get more involved with protecting voting rights, particularly as we know there are dozens of bills pending in dozens of red states to try and do exactly what Georgia's done?
I think so. And I also do want to say that, the effort that happened in Georgia was incredible. And I do think that they are afraid that other southern states are going to take this lead. I think they are very scared of that they will lose their grip on the South. So, but I do think the DOJ is going to step in here and get more involved with the voting rights. So this was underscored by Merrick Garland himself when he said at his press conference, "This lawsuit is the first of many steps we are taking to ensure that all eligible voters can cast a vote, that all lawful votes are counted, and that every voter has access to accurate information." Also, the DOJ announced it is launching a task force to address a rise in threats against election officials. So I think the DOJ here, they're signaling that even without a For the People Act, thanks to Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema, the DOJ is going to use still, in the meanwhile, these limited tools that they do have to protect these voting rights.
Yeah, I think the phrase that you just used there is really crucial to understand, right? Like the idea of what remains of the Voting Rights Act are limited tools, right? So what's the DOJ asking for in this lawsuit?
So it only attacks these ballot drop-off rules, the absentee rules, and the food and water distribution ban, which is interesting. So there's no attack directly on that provision that would allow these state officials to take over these local election officials and override them, which is interesting. But there is another weird thing. It asks that pre-clearance be used against Georgia.
Okay, so now you're going to have to break this down for me because, I mean, my understanding is Shelby County versus Holder, that effectively killed the pre-clearance requirements of the Voting Rights Act. That was a Roberts opinion, and the reasoning was, the Voting Rights Act is 50 years old and we've had a black president and racism is pretty much over. So, there's no need to make sure that we pre-clear states anymore. And then, of course, immediately after Shelby County versus Holder, you saw a bunch of historically southern states pass a whole bunch of new voter suppression bills now that they can. So I guess I'm skeptical. Like, talk to me about that.
Yes, and I was in Mississippi at the time. I very well remember as soon as they said racism is over, they were like, we have all these voting rights bills that we, and they, of course, dress them up as voting rights bills and to protect the right to vote. But yeah, I remember when all those were passed randomly after, Shelby County v. Holder happened. It's such a weird coincidence. So, but there is this part of the Voting Rights Act under Section 2 that still allows for preclearance to be imposed against states that commit egregious discrimination against minority voters. Of course, what egregious means, who's to say? But I think the DOJ, they really wanted to be careful here in their suit to only attack what it felt it could for sure connect to Section 2. But if it were me bringing this, I know that I'm too good for the DOJ apparently, but I would just attack all of it. And then if the judge disagrees with what parts violate Section 2, so be it. I would let the judge decide that. If they're like, well, we think that your argument about, the state election officials then taking over the local election boards is a little bit of a stretch, so be it. But I'll let the judge decide that. But that would be me. Merrick Garland has not hired me, breaking news, to file this lawsuit. So, but that would be my approach. But again, I'm not at the DOJ, so I can't say. But if preclearance is reimposed, and this will prevent Georgia from passing laws that disenfranchise black voters, because the DOJ would then have oversight over any laws they want to pass regarding voting. There are some courts that say that there must be racist intent, though, in order to show a violation of a VRA protection of minority voters. We see that with Alito and Abbott v. Perez. Ian Millhiser at Vox actually seems to believe that Abbott v. Perez is actually going to kill this suit. He says there's still a possibility, but it's going to have a very, very uphill climb. But basically, yeah, preclearance was essentially like with a state that has historically disenfranchised voters, which, we know our history, hopefully here, so a lot of the South. So yeah, they would have to basically go through these hoops and have approval by the DOJ, but there has been no state that's had to do this since, again, Shelby County v. Holder. So this is a very interesting tactic.
So if I understand that correctly, pre-Shelby County versus Holder, the VRA required that any state that had historically discriminated against African Americans, and it essentially listed off the old Confederacy, was required to seek preclearance from a 3-judge panel in D.C. before they could pass new laws that imposed restrictions on voting. Shelby County v. Holder got rid of presumptive preclearance, but it sounds like your reading on this case, in light of subsequent case law, is that the part that remains in Section 2, so that was Section 5, was the automatic preclearance.
Yes.
The part that remains in Section 2 applies, but it applies only in the cases of, quote, egregious discrimination, and that our friend Sam Alito has read that as you must demonstrate racist intent. And so if that's the case, I think I can understand, strategically saying we can demonstrate the racist intent with you can't hand out water bottles because, Fulton County gets the same amount of funding for the same amount of polling sites as, an unpopulated void county in, Western Georgia. I get that. It is harder to say that takeover is necessarily has racist intent.
No. I think that's right. I think that it is harder, and it's the esteemed Justice Alito. He's always ruining everything. So so basically this is dealing with Section 2, not Section 5. So, but there has to be that finding of egregious racist intent, that egregious discrimination against minority voters. So basically the courts are kind of split on how you can find this. So it's either, it has to be, you were intending to be racist. So basically everybody got their Klan hoods on and walked to the state legislature and passed this law, or if it just has a, impact on minority voters. So there is a split there. But with Abbott v. Perez, that was a redistricting case. So it can be distinguished. But you just look at what Dan Crenshaw's district looks like. It looks like a snake with one of those giant pyramid heads, like the bad guys have in Silent Hill. And then the snake got a Brazilian butt lift and it's bent over and twerking. It looks insane. I am describing this as accurately as I can. So anyway, so Alito just said, well, there's no racist intent behind the redistricting, so it is fine. But Ian Millhiser at Vox seems to believe that president is going to lead the Northern District of Georgia here to say, oh, well, maybe there was no racist intent because, again, well, they weren't wearing Klan robes, technically, when they passed the law. So you can't say it was racist, so it's fine.
Yeah, and look, not everybody is Justice Alito. There are other ways, the other methodologies that courts have accepted for demonstrating, for example, that the law has a disparate impact from which, we can infer some level of intent, even if it's not, kind of the dressing up in the Klan hood. So how does this suit kind of plead out the case, right? Like, does it, well, why don't you talk about how this suit does it?
It does it really well. So the DOJ here is aware of these differing, kind of standards. So they do a good job of establishing both. So the suit goes on to explain how the Black population in Georgia increased by 13.9% from 2010 to 2019. So now that population is 31.9% of Georgia.
Wow.
Yeah, which is, a huge amount of population like that, as I've always said, when people, they talk bad about Mississippi, I'm like, that's the blackest state in the country. Yeah. So you might want to watch your mouth, So yeah, like the fact is, the South is, growing in that electorate, and 69% of that growth happened in the Atlanta region. Everybody I know is moving to Atlanta. So, so that tracks. So they actually talk in the lawsuit about how the white electorate in Georgia actually is decreasing while the Black electorate is increasing. So in the runoff, and they give a lot of numbers in this lawsuit, 54.34% of Black registrants voted, while 64.11% of white registrants voted. So that's about close to a 10% difference there. So it's, and that gap is closing. So they also talk about how more Black voters voted absentee in 2020. It points out how it's not a coincidence that these laws are going to restrict a way that Black people often vote after several Black candidates won, including Senator Warnock. And then also Georgia elected its first Jewish American senator. And that matters because they make connections to this bigoted and very racist abuse that election workers and candidates received. There was anti-Semitism going on in campaigns against Senator Ossoff. There was, these racist attacks against Senator Warnock. And then they even throw in, the racist abuse that Stacey Abrams received when she ran in 2018. There's an incredibly racist robocall that went around. It's horrible. I mean, you can go read about it. It's awful. So the suit also goes into Georgia's racist history. But if Justice Roberts were presiding, he would say, yes, I understand Georgia has a terrible history with this, but racism was fixed when Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream. So I don't know how this is going to go, but the suit does lay its case out very well, but there is a very big hill to climb here. But it's very ambitious, and I like to see it.
I think I agree with that assessment, right? It sounds like the fact that it has both the statistical component and the historical component, is going to give, the judge in this case, kind of maximum flexibility as to, what he'd like to sink his teeth into. Who is the judge in this case?
Okay, so we have J.P. Bouley. I think it's Bouley. J.P. Bouley. I don't know why I said Boulay, like he's French. I went to New Orleans there for a second. I'm sorry. But bad news is he's a Trump appointee, but he is 50. So he's not a 28-year-old Federalist Society member that just came out of Yale. So silver lining there. He got his undergrad from Washington and Lee and his JD from University of Georgia. So he's a fellow SEC law school grad. He spent a good amount of time in JAG, and he tried dozens of cases both as a prosecutor and for defense. Then he became a partner at Jones Day, which is a huge law firm, at their office in Atlanta, where he was a member of corporate criminal investigations and business and tort litigation groups. He became a state judge in 2015, and he actually founded a veterans treatment court, which I thought was pretty cool. He was also appointed as a state judge by Governor Nathan Deal until 2019, and that's when he was selected for a federal bench by Trump. As we are all familiar, he went on this federal judge hiring spree, and neither of us were selected. I wonder why, but I don't think we met the criteria, but he's been a district judge for the Northern District of Georgia since June 14th, 2019, so he is newer.
Yeah. And look, I think we're all rightfully skeptical, concerned over a Trump appointee. I will point out, one of my very good friends is now on the bench as a Trump appointee. She was an Obama appointee that was held up because of the Mitch McConnell Obama's not allowed to appoint justices anymore rule, and so her judgeship at the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland went nowhere. And then when that hold was lifted, Republicans in Maryland suggested and this is Stephanie Gallagher, that they renominate her. And so, right? So the same person who was totally unacceptable 3 years earlier, sailed through with bipartisan support. And for Bolie here, it from everything you've laid out, rather it not be in front of a Trump appointee, but if it's going to be in front of anybody, it sounds like this is not a bad choice.
Yeah, and he's got a lot of this criminal experience, so I'm not sure. I couldn't tell how he's going to treat voting rights, although as a Trump appointee, then probably not promising, because, it's different from a situation of your friend. I mean, the Republicans in Maryland are a bit bizarre. I'll just go and say that. True. Yeah, I'm not sure how he's going to treat this, but the lawsuit does a very good job of laying everything out. Like I said, the timeline, the history, this racist intent, it does a really great job of that. So the law was passed, like we talked about earlier, because the GOP leaders in Georgia did not like the outcome of a 2020 election. They do a great job of connecting those two, to this timeline of, here's how the electorate changed, here's what happened, and they did not like that. So they decided we're going to stop these people from voting. And I think that asking for pre-clearance is an interesting strategy. There are 7 other cases, at least, before this judge attacking this law. So, and all of them are before him, J.P. Bolie. So he will definitely be hearing all kinds of grounds for attacking the law, and he's going to become very familiar with this case. I mean, it's eight cases on the same subject matter before him. But we shall see how he rules. You're an optimist, so I am going to try not to drag you down. I think the best move is to abolish the filibuster and pass the For the People Act.
Here.
But, we are here. So, in hell. Hopefully not for long. But in the meantime, this is what we have. And so we shall see. I mean, it's promising that the DOJ is stepping in, though, and Merrick Garland seems to be looking and saying, okay, well, what tools do I have to step in and protect voting rights in the meanwhile? Because that is a priority of the Biden administration, it seems, very much so from the DOJ's latest actions.
I couldn't agree more. So I guess bottom line is that we've got to keep an eye on it.
That's exactly right.
Okay. All right. We're going to take another quick break for an ad, and then we will come back. Hey, this is an ad for Monk Pack. This is Andrew here. This portion of the podcast is sponsored by Monk Pack. It is ridiculously hard to find snacks that are both healthy and delicious, right? Healthier they are, the worse they taste. You know that. That's why I gotta tell you, I really do like Monk Pack, right? I've been doing the keto diet. Super hard during COVID. I'm trying to get back on that horse again. Monk Pack Keto Seed and Nut Bars contain less than 1 gram of sugar, 2 to 3 grams of net carbs total per bar, only 150 calories, and best part, they actually taste really, really good. Like, they are great for anyone. Who's truly is trying to do keto. They would be the perfect snack for anybody trying to eat better, cut back on sugar, carbs without sacrificing taste. The Monk Pack Keto Nut and Seed Bars, they've got a really, really good balance of sweet and salty. You get the crunch from the whole nuts and seeds. They still manage to be soft and chewy. If you've done keto before, you know textures can be a big deal, and I think they really do it right. They come in delicious flavors, right? Caramel sea salt, right? I'm a caramel sea salt guy. Sea salt and dark chocolate, peanut butter dark chocolate. Look, this is perfect for a quick snack to indulge your sweet tooth without too much guilt, right? So they're also packed with protein. They're filling and satisfying. They're keto friendly. They are gluten-free. They are plant-based. There's no soy, no trans fats, no sugar alcohols, no artificial colors. I gotta tell you, I'm snacking on these bars. So to make sure that I'm always fully stocked up, I signed up for a subscription, and that saves me 10% on every order, ships to me automatically, getting treats on a regular basis in the mail. Total game changer in my effort to eat healthier, because it's not, dependent on if I've made a special trip out to the grocery store or not. I really think if you're trying to do that, you'll like Monk Pack. So try it for yourself, right? As always, we have a special deal for our listeners: 20% off your first purchase of any Monk Pack product by visiting monkpack.com and entering our code CLEANUP at checkout. MunkPack is so confident in their product, backed with a 100% satisfaction guarantee. If you don't like it for any reason, they'll exchange the product or refund the money, whichever you prefer. So here's how you get started. You know how to do this. Munkpack.com, MUNKPACK.com. Select any product, enter cleanup at checkout, get 20% off. MunkPack. Delicious, nutritious food you can count on. And we really want to thank them for sponsoring the show.
Next up, it's Infrastructure Week again. Always Infrastructure Week. And you and Allison correctly predicted that Biden would do exactly what it looks like he's doing, going to Joe Manchin and the most centrist Democratic senators and let them try and craft a bipartisan bill that actually funds more than $1 trillion into infrastructure. That's into rebuilding roads and bridges and expanding rural access to broadband, which disproportionately benefits a lot of red states. I can speak to this from experience. So you get Republicans to buy into the actual infrastructure in enough numbers to pass a real bill. And then you can get the rest of the stuff you wanted through the end of the year budget reconciliation process where you only do need 50 votes.
Yeah, I told him to do that, right? But what I didn't tell Biden to do was the classic Trump thing of, saying the quiet part out loud, and that looks like it's happened, right? So here's what's happened. Last week, Biden appeared with, usual suspects on the Democratic right, Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, but also 5 Republicans, right? Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Mitt Romney, Rob Portman, who's always been, sort of more centrist on budget issues, and Bill Cassidy. Had put a pin in that. That is so interesting to me that sort of after being kind of a doctrinaire right-wing Republican, it feels like after voting to convict Trump on the second impeachment, he's like, well, they hate me now anyway, so might as well govern. It's just an interesting story to me. Anyway, so Biden appeared with those 5. They announced that they've got 6 more Republicans on board who were prepared to vote for that $1 trillion infrastructure package you described, right? And I have to point out, in addition to, right, the giveaways to red states, which, shocker, Democrats are always in favor of doing because, we would like kids in rural areas to be able to get on the internet. We're not, we don't punish them for living in a state that, didn't vote for a presidential candidate. But it also has things that, qualify as unambiguously liberal stuff, right? Like investing in clean energy and investing in mass transit, right? And all of this is in, if not open defiance of Mitch McConnell. He hasn't weighed in one way or the other. It's doing an end run around Mitch McConnell, right? So look, all of that really, really good political strategy. Great. Good job, Joe. Then Biden had to open his mouth later on in the day.
Yeah, but I don't see that necessarily as a bad thing, him opening his mouth. But because I do think that a lot of, especially on the more progressive side of things, they're getting kind of frustrated with Biden, and the whole, even though most of this is, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, I'm sorry, that's our majority. You live with the facts that are on the ground. But I think that he's just trying to signal, I got this done.
Yeah.
So
Biden. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to underscore. You make an excellent point here, right? That it is really, really easy for us to criticize, but Biden is walking a tightrope. He has to keep Joe Manchin in line, and then at the same time, he's got to go out and keep what is now what I hope he starts to think of as his base of progressive Democrats, right? Of blue no matter who folks, and to say hey, look. This is why you elected me, and I am still voting. I'm not mealy-mouthed. I'm not wishy-washy. I haven't given up on the rest of the infrastructure bill. That's a really, really good point, and I just wanted to underscore that.
Yes, yeah, I think he is trying to show that I am not compromising on anything, basically, but I'm getting them in line. You get on board or you can go shut up. Basically,
so what did he say?
Works. Biden vowed that he would only sign the bipartisan plan into law if Congress simultaneously sends him a bill that's crafted separately by the Democrats to shore up the other elements that the Republicans objected to, as them saying, oh, this isn't really infrastructure. So what Biden is calling our nation's social infrastructure that he wants to shore up in this bill as well. So that second bill would be drafted solely by Democrats, and that would be introduced through reconciliation, which, as I said, only needs 50 votes.
And again, right, so you see that tightrope, right? So you get the Republicans to agree to fund $1 trillion in necessary stuff. And then, how much of this is, does it motivate your base? Or to those Republicans that signed up, does it feel like you're being taunted afterwards with, the thing they know you can do anyway, because you've already done it, once for the COVID relief bill. According to Politico, right, a center-right kind of publication, Republicans knew Democrats were working on the reconciliation bill, but they got, hurt feelings when Biden said it out loud. And that led, some of those second-tier Republican lawmakers, right, not the ones who helped craft the deal, but the also, because you got to get to 10, right? So you've got another 6, and they include, Lindsey Graham and Mike Rounds from South Dakota, and those were the folks who threatened to take their ball and go home.
Yeah, I think that Lindsey Graham was going to do that anyway because he misses having his name in the Politico headlines. Oh,
man, yeah. That Lindsey Graham loves Lindsey Graham, that is for sure.
He does. I mean, I love me too, but we love ourselves in different ways, don't we? So the important thing, though, is that you're calling this a deal. And that's how it's been reported. But it's not really a deal yet because it's not we have voted on a real bill. Instead, what we have is a framework for the kind of stuff that these 11 Republicans have tentatively agreed that they would want to fund over the next 8 years. And then there's the funding part. So some of it would come from new spending, but Republicans are, of course, going to demand that some of the programs be self-funding through things like auctioning off the 5G spectrum that gives you COVID, according to crazy people, or collecting back taxes. So that means that the scoring provided by the Independent Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, is coming back into the picture. So that's going to be really crucial. So the more this looks like a small raise, the harder it's going to be for the Republicans to back out of it. Though.
Yeah, that's a really, really excellent point. And I would just add to that, infrastructure spending is politically very popular. Republicans have already done the photo op appearance, right, with the president at the Rose Garden. So if the framework, as you put it, take that correction. That's really smart. If that framework blows up on their watch, it strikes me that it's more likely than not that it's Republicans who are going to shoulder that blame. And especially as we're heading into midterm season, right? And Democrats are looking for good arguments to try and win back the Senate. Joe Manchin won't end the filibuster is a hard sell, in Peoria, but Republicans won't rebuild our bridges, isn't?
Yeah, and especially as, we see more and more of this infrastructure happening in the news, right? You think about the Miami condo collapse. You think about, the Mississippi River Bridge that I have driven over a dozen times. If you haven't seen it, look it up. There's a literal crack in it. And it was, and people were saying, it was only a matter of time before this thing collapses and a bunch of bridges tumble into the Mississippi River. So that's comforting. But yeah, that is the sell to make. So we'll be watching to see if Biden has really outfoxed him after all.
Let's hope so. All right. So Morgan, I can't wait to get to our last segment. But now the show's a couple months in, we definitely need to do our monthly shout out to our Hall of Fame patrons. So if you are in that tier, $10 or more a month, you will get the shout out once a month, every month, starting now. So, and I'm not saying that we love our Hall of Fame patrons more than the rest of you, but we do. So, thanks to Mitchell, Patty B, January 20th, baby, Chris Waltrip, Jameel Chohan, Charles Jones, Metacon 7, R.I.P. My friend Harry Mosley survived cancer twice, only to be shot by some punk. The incomparable Jessica Outbeer, FHVJXR, STPHYVFEE. All right, I mean, come on. But hey, you give us Hall of Fame levels, and I'll try and go through. David in Brooklyn. Joe Manchin is the Donald Trump of Susan Collins's. Crime or no criming. Lance Buckley. It's kind of nice having a competent federal government again. SummitShuffleboard.com. They said I could be anything, so I became two fabulous lesbians. Stephen Mackinnon, Dude, Christopher Dalpy, Lauren Eggert, and our all-time great, the Conrad Michaels of Aisle 45, Chris Simpson. Okay, now on to the D block.
So, for the last but not least segment, I wanted to talk about the insurrection because Andrew knows I like to follow not just the comings and goings of the last administration, but also the various people trying to destroy our democracy because truly I am sick and there is something wrong with me.
All right, but what insurrection are we talking about now, right? There are so many to choose from, and what charges, right? Like, it seems like the potential charges out there vary from, trespass to assault to conspiracy to seditious conspiracy.
All right, so these are the first assault charges against somebody for assaulting a member of the media that were filed just a few days ago. Shane Jason Woods, age 43, he has an indictment longer than my arm, which is always not good to have. He has assault on a law enforcement officer, assault in a special maritime and territorial jurisdiction, and engaging physical violence in a restricted building or grounds.
Ooh, special maritime jurisdiction. I hope the flag has gold fringe on it and that he is a sovereign citizen and we will just get like unbelievable levels of crazy. All right, but with all that said, you said assault on a member of the media. What exactly did he do, right? Like it seems like, right? I think I'm sharing a view a lot of people have here that there are people who came charging into the Capitol without a plan, right? And then there are those who clearly came in there with a plan, with zip ties, with tear gas, right? Or at least came in there and were prepared for it to escalate, even if they didn't intend for it. Anyway, this guy sounds like he belongs in that latter category, right? The intent category.
Yes, unfortunately, I don't get to use my maritime law skills that I have, but here it's a special area because it's the Capitol. But he definitely is the latter. So he is somebody that came in there and he seems to have committed violence according to the indictment. So he allegedly tripped and pushed a U.S. Capitol police officer to the ground, and this officer had already been sprayed with bear mace earlier by another insurrectionist.
Oh, is this guy? Was this guy with the bear mace guy, or was it just like there was one poor Capitol police officer that ran into both of these people?
I think it happens pretty quickly. You can see there is a YouTube video up that actually the DOJ does cite to this YouTube video. They literally take screenshots from the video and post them in. But yeah, it looks like, oh, here's a guy that's already down. Let me, go into him and beat him up. But because bear mace, I have never been maced at all. But I do know bear mace, like that is to get a bear away from you. So that is some intense stuff. Like you are going to be down on the ground if you just got bear mace. I'm not sure if they were together or if they knew each other. I don't have those details. But he also then ran into and tackled a cameraman outside the Capitol as the cameraman was facing away from him. This is also in that same video. Like a macho man does, knocking people down when they're already like bear maced or they have their back to you. So there's a video that shows that Woods is fleeing the area where the cameraman was, and he tackles him, causes him to fall to the ground and drop his news camera. So they say that Woods was also among insurrectionists who damaged equipment that was left after media fled the area because, things escalated. And so a lot of time, there was some equipment that was left. And also clearly if somebody knocks you over, sometimes they'll drop your equipment, etc. So one cameraman said his equipment that is worth about, you think of these news cameras, they are expensive. So this is about this equipment alone. One cameraman said about $34,000 was destroyed. So there's a whole circle of them. You can, again, see this in videos and such of them that are damaging the equipment that's on the ground that had to be abandoned or was possibly dropped or, somehow taken from people. And they're just over here just beating up on this equipment and yelling horrible things about the media.
All right. And yes, and I've seen those and I'm glad that serious charges are coming down at people that are, assaulting the press and destroying expensive equipment. But Morgan, I happen to know firsthand that you are great at cyber stalking, so I'm guessing that you found some stuff that has eluded the mainstream reporting about this guy.
Yes, I did. So, of course I did. Yes, because I was like, let me find some things. So he's a small business owner. He is from Illinois. I know a lot of people love to be like, oh, all these people are probably from Alabama. No, the Midwest has, the Midwest is be wildin'. So he is a small business owner. He owns this heating and cooling business. If you look at actually, I know this from, listening to Robert Evans, his podcast, Behind the Bastards, other books and sources and things. And what I've noticed is that who is most likely to support fascists, it's not really the poor. It's like these middle class to upper middle class people. A lot of them, have their own businesses and such. Because if you look at the kind of, these big trucks they drive, these are like $60,000 trucks. Yeah. And a lot of them, but they like to cosplay as, oh, I'm a redneck. And also some of them are actually quite wealthy. Yeah, it's insane. It's a whole cosplay thing they feel the need to do. It's
cosplay
bonkers.
As a redneck is going into my vernacular now. I love it. Anyway.
Yeah, unlike me, who's unfortunately a real one. So there is some poor people too, but it is wild just how those parallels match up. If you look at who historically over time has supported fascists, and then who actually was at this insurrection, who participated. The demographics line up. I'm just going to say that. But the indictment does have this hilarious tidbit. He went to Taco Bell the day before the insurrection, and I don't know why, but that cracked me up. Like, he's just drinking that Baja Blast
Crunch Wrap
and just
Supreme,
was like, you know
baby.
What? The Crunch Wrap. Oh, no.
I'm also guessing, and I feel like this one is just going to set up on a tee, because these people can never shut the fuck up on social media. I'm guessing he posted about the insurrection the day after, right?
Oh, how did you know? So he posted on Facebook, the best social media site, of course, that he was headed to DC, and also a Facebook friend. I don't know if it was so much as a friend, but because the FBI has this in the indictment, and the DOJ does. And this friend messaged him and said, saw you out in front of the White House, ha. Woods responded, Capitol building. Yeah, I'm sorry, I meant State Capitol. When did you guys get there? Then Woods responds, last night, driving home, long drive. And so I love that correction he made. No, I was not in front of the White House. I was, in fact, in front of the Capitol, during the insurrection.
So basically he admitted it, right? When the friend said White House, he was like, no, I was definitely at the insurrection.
The smartest people. But yes, exactly. And he sent a picture of the Capitol to another Facebook user who responded, nice. The swarm will be coming in an hour or two. I don't like that word. Glad you guys made it safe. Grab an Antifa by their hair and send them rolling, will ya? Which lovely use of gender-neutral pronouns there, I will say. So he and this Facebook user did have prior conversations. And then in December 2020, Wood said to this Facebook user, Trump wouldn't be golfing around if he was worried.
Oh, so close. Right. What you mean is Trump was not worried because he has never cared. So close to getting the point.
Exactly. I'm like, let's work through that thought a little bit. So the Facebook user responds to Woods saying, true, I hope that he has an ace in his pocket. I want to see all these asshats go to jail too. Woods responded by saying hung. So, escalating it. And the friend says, fire squad. Should be hung by treason though.
As you were telling me that story, like I went from hung to hung jury. Like it never occurred to me that of course these people meant, hung by the neck until dead. Anyway, I guess this goes to diffuse any potential arguments that he was, just visiting the Capitol, wanting a tour, wanting to check out the gift shop.
Yeah, no, the argument that I was just perusing the snow globe, I don't think that's going to work out so well for him. But here's something else that's fun, depending on your definition of fun. But on January 19th, 2021, an associate asked Woods via Facebook Messenger, so this is January 19th after the insurrection, has the FBI come after you yet?
Oh.
Yes. So I love that some random, I guess that was friends of him, was like, hey man, has the FBI come and gotten you? I don't know if this was somebody taunting him or somebody who was genuinely concerned, but I do love how the DOJ just kind of ends their paragraph on that section of the indictment with just that, like, end scene. Excellent writing there for that. But they do have a lot of evidence. So they've compared the photos of him, you know, to his license, his passport photo. They have a witness who identified him, who was actually a customer of his back in his town and has been his customer, like, consistently. And, you know, they've obviously probably showed pictures and they're like, oh yeah, that's Woods, you know, I've dealt with him before. And they also have another witness who's identified him. They have these YouTube videos. There's literally video footage of him on YouTube, like I've said before, attacking the officer and the cameraman. And then he gets over that toppled barricade and joins in to amongst the people who are, you know, destroying this equipment.
Yeah, I mean, this sounds like that. And again, as you've responsibly pointed out, these are all allegations at this point. But it sounds like... again, the DOJ is doing a really, really good job in teeing up these cases, right? In terms of proving an intent here, right? Like, I think, you know, you have to, prosecutors every day take cases to the jury and ask them to infer mindset. It's hard to do more to show the mentality that these folks had when they arrived at the Capitol. Then you know, show this kind of immediate propensity for violence, but also for cowardly violence, right? Like the going after the officer who was down because of the bear mace, or the cameraman with his back turned, or, you know, destroying equipment, but only once it's on the ground, right? I don't know. What do you make of all of that?
I think that's exactly right. I think it is absolutely cowardice. And it shows that, you know, once these people, you know, for a lot of these people, they will join into violence, because he definitely did participate in the violence as well. So that's something to keep in mind. But it is, again, this kind of like violence that's couched in this cowardice. So that's, you know, definitely something. I'm not sure exactly what that means. I can't, you know, psychoanalyze this man. I'm not a doctor, but I do think that is a trend, at least, you know, pay attention to and examine. But I think all that's exactly right. The point that you made about the cowardice and the violence, but all this is alleged, you know, legal disclaimer. But this is a strong case, and I keep seeing a trend of these Facebook users too. Like I don't see very many, you know, people being like, they posted on Twitter, or, you know, there's been some, but a lot of them I've noticed are the Facebook. That seems to be very consistent, is Facebook is the social media that keeps getting thrown out there as like basically the documenter of these crimes. So even the ones who are posting about what they were doing or what they did. So I can't help but wonder how much of his radicalization, you know, which I'm sure they had this prior resentment towards the libs, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying Facebook created that, but I do wonder, like, how much of that was just kind of bust wide open by Facebook's algorithms, right? We've seen these stories about how Facebook's algorithms have, you know, made people go further down into that rabbit hole of, you know, just hating liberals and being racist and sexist and just awful. But also it really shows that they really believed also that they probably would face zero consequences. I mean, they're over here posting about it on Facebook, and these same people have probably made fun of people on the news. You know, you would see these news stories about, oh, this guy robbed a gas station and then posted, you know, the money he got on Facebook, and that's how he was caught. And they'll be like, haha, dummy. And it's like they're doing the same thing. Yeah. So, you know, I think to me that means they really believed that they would face zero consequences, which is really, I think, something worth exploring. You know, did they think that Donald Trump was going to take back over and they were going to be, you know, given rewards? Or do they think nobody would care? Yeah. And that we were just going to move on?
Yeah, I don't know. But look, here's what I do know, right? As we continue to talk about on the show, There are over 500 of these pending cases. The DOJ needs to sort through that. I love, Morgan, that we were able to do a deep dive on this Woods case and, kind of zoom in. It is certainly worth pointing out, like, there are now, of those over 500 cases, over 100 are folks who have been charged with assaulting officers. So, there's a lot of work to be done, and we're going to keep monitoring that, trying to figure it out. I think you and I are both of the view that sure would have been nice to have had a bipartisan January 6th commission to investigate this for the public and proceed along another track. But we'll have to make do for now with what the DOJ does in bringing these cases. Morgan, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. It's always hard to sit in Allison's chair, but I thought you did a fantastic job. And anything you want to promote before we go?
I guess I will promote my Twitter, unless you are a bar association looking for suspect tweets. No, you didn't see my Twitter. But no, I don't post anything too wild. I've just been accused of posting thirst traps. But no, you can follow me on Twitter. I talk about serious things and also not serious things. So that is @mostring. I will spell it because my accent, makes it a little bit difficult. That is MOSTRING. So you can find me on Twitter, MOSTRING. And you can find me occasionally on other podcasts. You can find me on, sometimes I'm on Opening Arguments. Sometimes I'm on Humans Holler at the News. I'm basically a semi-professional podcast guest / substitute host at this point. So we'll see where that goes. But yeah, for now, Twitter's the best way to keep up with me.
And also the best damn associate in the world. So Morgan, thank you so much. And everybody have a great week, and we will see you next Wednesday.
Cleanup on Aisle 45 is written, researched, and produced by Allison Gill and Andrew Torres, with editing by Molly Hockey. Our art and logo design are by Joelle Reeder and Moxie Design Studios, and our music is composed and performed by Adam Orr. Cleanup on Aisle 45 is a proud member of the MSW Media Network, a collection of creator-owned podcasts dedicated to news, politics, and justice. For more information, visit mswmedia.com.
Season 4 of How We Win is here.
For the past 4 years, we've been making history in critical elections all over the country. And last year, we made history again by expanding our majority in the Senate, beating election-denying Republicans in crucial state house races, and fighting back a non-existent red wave.
But the MAGA Republicans who plotted and pardoned the attempted overthrow of our government now control the House, thanks to gerrymandered maps and repressive anti-voter laws. And the chaotic spectacle we've already seen shows us just how far they will go to seize power, dismantle our government, and take away our freedoms.
So, the official podcast of The Persistence is back with Season 4. There's so much more important work ahead of us to fight for equity, justice, and our very democracy itself. We'll take you behind the lines and inside the rooms where it happens with strategy and inspiration from progressive changemakers all over the country.
And we'll dig deep into the weekly news that matters most and what you can do about it with messaging and communications expert, co-founder of Way to Win, and our new co-host, Jennifer Fernandez-Ancona.
So join Steve and I every Wednesday for your weekly dose of inspiration, action, and hope.
I'm Steve Pearson.
And I'm Jennifer Fernandez-Ancona.
And this is How We Win.